Another rainy day in Seattle. This is what I'm using this year for 2017 as far as a mix for my fig cuttings. So I've gone back to the cup method just because I'm not trying to do volume here. And as far as my mix, really simple. It's just small bark, perlite, and that's it. I once had cocoa core in here, so there might be a little bit of that in here as well. You know, the one thing I don't like about perlite is that it's really dusty, and I hate breathing that stuff in. So, you know, if you're working with this stuff, try to wear a mask. I usually just cover my face with my my t-shirt while I'm digging it up. So, let's do this real quick. What you want to do here is just get it centered, fill about 3/4 of the cup. Looking good. So you can hear the rain that's coming down. And it's kind of a wet and ugly day to be outside, but because we have the benefit of rainwater, I've just been collecting it and then using it to wet all of my fig cuttings. Here, Seattle rain can't get any better than that. So I like to use very loose medium now for my fig cuttings because it drains better and leaves plenty of pockets of air for oxygen, and I feel like it actually creates more of an ideal environment for the roots to grow in. So these will go straight into my humidity bins, and I have that on top of a heat mat. On top of that heat mat, I have a piece of cardboard to kind of regulate that temperature a little bit. Without it, it gets into the 80s, and these cuttings will dry out relatively quickly. That means that I have to water these more often than I want to. But that's okay, it's a labor of love. Typically about every 3 days I have to take a turkey baster and just kind of spray some water into the cups and let it drain out. Alright, so today is February 21st. Let's do a quick update on my setup for rooting this year. I'm not doing a whole lot of cuttings this year. Just focusing on, you know, about a dozen or so, maybe 2 different varieties that I don't have. That's been on my wish list for a year or 2, or something I've read that, you know, says that it does well with breedable crops. And does well with the climate here in Seattle. Anyhow, I've got 3 bins going, and this year I also bought a heat mat. It was pushing the temperature up to about 80 something degrees, so I've actually taken a piece of cardboard, put it over the heat mat, and it's done a pretty good job of keeping the temperature at about 75, which is a little bit more ideal than like 85. Before I put the piece of cardboard on the mat, it was actually drying out the bins a lot faster. So I didn't want that. anyhow, let's take a look at what we have inside. So these cuttings have been in here. Look at all that condensation on here. No more than, these ones are relatively new, about a week old. And there's some that are already kind of leafing out. I do see some green here, and let's see if we can focus in on that. I do see a little green over there on that guy. So this is about a week old. Okay, so what I want to show you is how I just kind of do a little spot cleaning on these moldy pieces. I'll dab a little piece of paper towel and just kind of dab the ends where I see the mold. And so I've learned that I used to have a bunch of fish tanks. If you have algae in your fish tank, hydrogen peroxide, it's also a good little remedy to get rid of some of the algae. So what I've done is I've divided my bins into stages, essentially. This bin, these two bins right here are for the more advanced, established cuttings that have leaves and roots, and these four are for new cuttings. You can see some of these are about a week old and they're already leafing out, but the root system hasn't developed yet. And these are for brand new cuttings right here, these two. So it's important to kind of come and look at your fig cuttings almost every single day, because things happen so quickly. If the conditions are not perfect for these fig cuttings, you know, you've got high humidity, you can get mold, you can get rot. If you have, you know, a heat mat, it tends to dry out these bins a lot faster, like I do. I've got a heat mat here, so I have to constantly watch the humidity on these guys. And then if you have, you know, fig plants that, or fig cuttings that have leaves, and you're trying to transition it to a drier environment, like the inside of your house, you constantly have to see whether or not they're getting enough water, getting enough humidity to stay nice and vibrant and healthy, and to keep them from drying out. So, you know, at this stage, I've got these guys kind of opened a little bit here, right? This is open about a crack. I got these guys open just about the same, and then these bins here I try to open up the lid completely for just a few minutes or up to an hour, and then I'll cover them again, but I'll leave kind of open a wider open slot, so that way they can still get some of the humidity and then get acclimated to the new air. And even at the top here, it's at 61% humidity, so that's great. You know, if I'm around, I'll kind of leave it open like this. If I'm at work, I'll close it up a little bit more, so that way I'm not jeopardizing over drying the plants. So something to keep in mind when you're rooting figs like this is to keep a couple rules in mind, okay? So ideally, you want roots before leaves, because if you see roots, then what you can do, take the plant out of the humidity bin so that when the new leaves emerge, they will already be used to the drier air. Okay? But if you get leaves before roots, which happens as well, then you have to keep the cutting in the humidity bin with the humidity higher, around 70 to 80%, because there aren't any roots to support the new leaves. Then it makes it a little bit harder for the plant to stay hydrated. So that means that the humidity either needs to be high, or you're constantly spraying the leaves. And some of these are definitely to the size where they can get up potted. I've been spraying these every 2 days and then exposing them to drier air more and more each day. So if you take a look at the humidity at the top of the bin down and over here at 63%, which is a good range, because eventually they're going to come out of here and then get into humidity in the room, which is about 35. Let's just peek at some of these here. Okay, oh well, I'm afraid if I pull some of these out, I might break the leaves on others that are just kind of dangling there. There we go. Some pretty decent roots in this one. So once they get to about this stage where you see those kind of branch roots, I call them feeder roots, you could definitely hit it with a little light fertilizer. And I can probably up pot this, but I'm going to leave it in here for a little bit longer so that it can further acclimate to drier air. And that makes the transition from cup to 1 gallon pot a little bit easier on the plant. So if I took these out, left it out, they might wilt. And that's not going to be good for the plant. been successful propagating your fig, taking care of the small trees, and then feeding it properly with fertilizer, you're eventually going to get something like this. This is probably the biggest fig tree in Seattle. One of the oldest for sure. This thing is probably 40 to 50 feet in the air. And if you approach the trunk, you'll see how big it is. That's my hand. I probably won't even be able to wrap my hand around it. There's two huge trunks on this thing. There's one here. There's another one with ivy growing all over it. Actually, 3 trunks actually. I don't know what variety this is, but there's no fruit yet on it. Well, actually there is. Definitely not a desert king. There's some small tiny fruit towards the end of the tips. So that's it, folks, and look where it's growing. Right in a rock wall where it loves to be. Figs like their roots to be a little bit warmer, a little bit on the toastier side. So these rocks in the summertime will warm up and provide the perfect environment for these figs. And this is why this thing is so huge, so successful, because it's growing in a spot where it loves. Alrighty. Thanks for watching. This is the biggest fig tree here in Seattle.